Hello, and welcome to the Homesick to Happy Movers podcast. I'm very excited that you're here today. And today we're talking with my friend Kate, and we're talking about big transitions. And Kate moved countries overseas with her family, and we're going to talk about all the transitions that came with it. So I'm very excited that you're here with me. Kate, welcome to the podcast.
Oh, thanks for having me. I'm really excited. I hope I can help somebody on their journey along the
Yeah.
way.
Yes. So you made a really big transition with your family. Could you share about what your moving journey looked like?
It was sort of fast. We had felt for about a year that the Lord was leading us. And my husband kept thinking it was just going to be to another state. And I kept getting this real feeling it was going to be overseas. And just to preface that, my husband had worked in Dayton, Ohio in 1979, just before we got married. And for some reason, I love the United States so much. And for some reason, I thought I'm going to get sent to England or somewhere like that. But no, it came very loud and clear. And that was about August. We organized a trip. We came over here in October, November. I went home, packed up the house, decided what we were taking, which wasn't very much. And we left Australia on the 26th of January, 1991, with 4 kids and different ages and half a suitcase each, because the movers promised us our stuff would be here before we would be here. And that didn't happen. But no, it was, my husband wrote one of the first antivirus products in the world. So it was a good move for us because we were going to move into a much bigger business market. And I thought that I was going to move into, I'm a singer-songwriter, or I still am, but that was my primary thing back then. And I really thought I was just going to make this really smooth transition over there and do it. And it turned out just a little bit different from that. So
Yeah. So how did your move expectations and reality turn out differently?
I think for the rest of my family, it was awesome. We got here on a Saturday, I believe, and we had moved into our rental house the next Friday. The next evening, my husband and I were sitting on the floor, and all my kids had found, as it turns out now, lifelong friends that they still have. And they were all gone, and we were sitting here. And of course, my husband had business connections here that we had made. So he was all excited to get going and, get a space, etc. And I was pretty excited, but it was beginning to dawn on me that I didn't know anybody. I had really, the biggest connection I had was the real estate agent. That was the biggest connection. And it suddenly dawned on me that maybe I was going to grow and learn a lot more than I actually anticipated, because being a singer-songwriter and very well established in a small market and then trying to transition turned out to be fairly difficult.
Yeah. And so I have been in similar situations where my husband has had all his connections, and kids, they typically make friends really easy. And there was a time where I just felt lost. Was there a time where you felt like that too?
Absolutely. At first I was sort of, I was working out, how am I going to meet people? And of course, coming from Australia, if your listeners haven't worked that out yet, church was very casual. We went to church in shorts or jeans or whatever the season. And so going to church here, the first church we were recommended to go to, which funnily enough is still my home church, even though I've wandered around a bit, I've come back there. But we walked in, and everybody on a Sunday morning, they were dressed up to their best, and they had hats on and high heels. So going from this, well, if you've ever watched Hillside or Hillsong on TV, you know what I'm talking about. Going from a casual, open atmosphere to a much more formal one really had me worried a bit, just because I thought, I can't relate. How do I relate to these people? So I did wander around a little lost for a while, but it was funny, in that time, I actually got really, really, really close to the Lord. And I decided to try to really make my music work. And I gave it my best shot, and God had other things in mind at that time. So just a few years after we got here, I really fell in a screaming heap on the floor, and I did not know what my purpose was. I felt like somehow I'd failed, because I had such expectations of coming here. And even though I did have some success with my music, and, I sold some CDs and stuff, it wasn't, I knew it was not going in the direction that it was supposed to. And that was a pretty tough year for me that year.
Yeah. It's very, very hard having these expectations that are set in stone.
Yes.
And then life looks so drastically different.
It did. It looked like so different, so different. But I do believe now, God had another purpose for us at that time, and that purpose was to move into adoption and fostering children. And I would have never done that. I would have never, ever done that if things had have moved at the pace, that they were going to, or I thought they were going to. And I think that changed my life, certainly for the better. So it changed me, and it made me a better person.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I think that gives some hope to the listeners too, that even though life doesn't look like the plan that you had in your head, God still has a plan for your life. And He is still working, and there is still good to come.
Oh, yes. I wouldn't have changed anything at all. And out of that, we ended up fostering about 50 special needs children, and we ended up adopting another 8 children under 7 that included 3 sets of twins. So literally I started a new life all over again. And it was funny. I let everything go. I was still writing music, but my focus was really on this journey we were now on, and my husband was 100% on that journey with me. And I would have never, ever, ever traded those years for anything, because it just gave me, oh gosh, so much more compassion, and so much, and not everything about me. It made me step outside of myself and see a whole different world that I had no idea even existed. And funnily enough, when my youngest, who were about 2 at that time, I think, and they're now nearly 20 and going off to college, but it was so funny. God said, no more of that. I want you to resign I had a drama position as the drama director of a large church I'm still at. And he said, resign. I'm going, what am I going to do? Resign. And then he turned that whole music thing back around.
Yeah.
In his timing, not my timing,
Yeah. How did he turn it around?
When I resigned and I thought, I don't know what I'm going to do, I just felt pick up the phone and call there are, how would I explain it? There are different companies that actually look after your personal songwriting rights, so that you get your royalties from all over the world. So they said, pick up, call your person, make an appointment, go back to Nashville. And I did. And I had always been in an organization called National Songwriters Association. So I went back there, and then I began advocating for, a Christian Songwriting Association, etc., our own chapter. And I moved through. I suddenly won CMT NSAI Songwriter of the Year. I also then won Singing News competition. And, and I found that life went on. I also found that I didn't want to do music in the same way that I had done it before. So, life changes. But, the sweet thing is that you learn to know yourself a little bit better and where you want to be in life.
Yes. Yeah, 100%. That sounds like an amazing ride too.
It has been. and it's so funny because I've been coordinator of this particular chapter, which is the only Christian chapter in America, and teaching or coordinating and helping songwriters for many years, and who've been very, very successful. And last Thursday of last week was a meeting. And before the meeting, I had been feeling this for a while. And God says, okay, call your 2 other coordinators and tell them you're stepping down.
Mm-hmm.
Now then, this is something amazing. And I thought, well, what am I going to do? But I felt so strongly about it. And I also felt, no, there's another path, and I don't know what it is. Well, my husband and I have been talking about going out and ministering to people about becoming foster and adoptive parents, because we have so many children in this country. And lo and behold, I go to a wedding shower on the Saturday, 2 days later, right? And I meet up with somebody who's desperately looking for their organization, and they are a non-for-profit who help people in foster care, and they are connected with a Christian foster care agency that I have done some work with. So it's leading and following, and so that's a whole new chapter that's about to open up for me, which I'm pretty excited about. So
awesome. It sounds so cool. And just God's like perfect timing.
Absolutely.
Yeah, that's very close. So to jump back in our conversation about when your family moved and your husband had, he was working and your kids had made friends, did you ever find that like you had a desperate need for conversation and the other people in your family kind of had that filled already?
Yeah, because I'm very outgoing most of the time. I'm sort of half and half, but most of the time I'm outgoing, and I struggled with finding friends that had the same interests, who one understood my sayings, which I've learned over the years, but and I found myself, quite frankly, I just go talk to God, because I didn't have anyone else. And I think that was exactly planned, how it was supposed to be. But was there times where I really was sitting there doing the ironing and felt so sorry for myself? I really did. And all I can say is, if anybody's listening, wherever you move, you're going to have to find some new people, and it's not going to be tomorrow. Relationships take time, and but in that time I really, really got into prayer and worship and writing, and I believe that, looking back now, even though at the time it was really painful, it was also a very special time. It was, and because my husband was rebuilding a whole new branch of the business here. So half the time he wasn't even home till late.
Yeah, I had a very similar journey where my kids were very young, so not to the point where they could have conversations. And my husband was working long hours, 6 to 7 days a week. And there was just very limited conversation, which was a huge need for my part. But Like I needed that conversation, and when he would come home, he did not need any more conversation. He just needed to chill and
Yeah.
relax and be in silence. Um, so it was a really interesting growth for me. Um, what I actually ended up doing is just diving into my Bible, reading more, and journaling it out. Like that is a form of communication too.
It is. I think so. And I must say that, I'm one, when I was writing, I'd be writing songs and I'd be writing about how I was feeling, what was happening, and putting them into song form. So it's sort of like journaling. When I look back at that time and I see what I wrote, I could see how sort of lost I was, or at the time I thought I was lost. I really did. And I think there's that transition, especially for women, not so men, because he would come home and he'd either be exhausted or he would say, I've got to do some more coding. I got to do something here, or I got to do something there. So yeah, it was, I agree with you 100%. And of course, I had a 9 and a 10-year-old who really weren't into talking much. I had a 16 and a 17-year-old, and at that time, and of course the 16-year-old was yay party, and the 18-year-old, she actually got a little lost too, because she didn't have anywhere to go, but she did go to work for her father. So she had something there, but she did spend a few months where her and I got closer, I guess, but she was also seeking to join and find her own friends at the same time, and didn't really want to hang around with mum all that much.
Yeah. So I feel like it's a common thing for when moving for a spouse's job to get that struggle. When you were deep in that struggle, were there things that you realized, or now looking back, realizations that you've had from that situation?
Oh, yes. I realized a whole lot of bad habits I had. I mean, not good ones. I realized that I'd picked up on, just things that my mother did that I swore I'd never do. I used to have, I would get into overwhelm, like really overwhelmed. So I would retreat into myself. The introvert would come out. So I would retreat deep into myself. So I really would shut myself off. My poor husband never knew what to do with me at that time. Honestly, he really didn't. Should he talk to me? I might hit him. I might throw something at him. I mean, but what was happening was I was working out that if I needed something and something wasn't working, instead of going into myself, I really needed to communicate. And I really needed to say something to him. And looking back, they were some of the best building our marriage years, because if I had to be, if he was my only real long-time source, and he's not a very, what would you say? He's not a chatty Cathy. He's, one of those analytical guys. He can be chatty Cathy when he gets out his dad jokes. and I just suddenly realized that things like, one, I'm a romantic. So I'd always think, why isn't he romantic? And then one day, I do believe God just dropped a brick on my head, and he said to me, teach him. So it was in these years that I actually taught him to be romantic. And I actually started being romantic. And in fact, he just walked through the door before, and he bought me a beautiful big bunch of flowers. Aww. He would have never done that back then. But so I started teaching him how to be romantic. So some of the things that came out of that were very painful for me. And I'm not going to say that I went, oh, joy, why can't he learn this by himself? They were extremely painful moments for me, but they built our marriage into something that's really, really solid, that could withstand, what God had in store for us later.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I feel like a lot of really painful moments are the basis for huge growth,
Absolutely.
huge personal growth. Yeah. So, but you piqued my interest when you say you taught your husband how to be romantic. Like, what are some of the ways that you did that?
Okay, I started, I would just pick up a card when I was at the supermarket, and then I'd go and leave it under his pillow, or I'd put it somewhere where he'd find it. And then I knew that he would be home sort of late, so I'd organise dinner with candles on the front veranda. And I just would make sure that I was the one that went and gave him a cuddle and told him I loved him. And I think sometimes we expect other people to know what we're thinking. And then I would buy flowers and I would put flowers in. And so he started to notice that this was these things. And quite frankly, when you do something, eventually the other person does it back. And he started to like that. He liked me doing that. So he would start to bring me a card and bring me flowers. And our relationship really, really solidified. But, if you don't tell Prince Charming that you want him to bring you flowers, he's never going to know. And so, and he's now pretty romantic. You can see these. Look, I don't know whether you can see them.
Oh, yeah, they're beautiful.
And in there, I can tell you there's some daisies, because it was about that time that he started singing me a song called "I'll Give You a Daisy a Day, Dear," and that's an old. I don't know who sang it, but who? Judd Strunk. But it's a song about a romance from young to an older couple, and now he walks up to the hillside at the end and gives her a daisy a day. So yes, so he always buys me flowers that have daisies in them. And honestly, I highly recommend, and I say this to people, there's no point in pouting and sulking and thinking I'm not loved, if you start to love somebody else and show them how you want to be loved, then they will reciprocate.
Yes. Yeah. And it takes the power back from somebody else's lap who they don't know what you want, and it brings it back into your possession, so you can start making progress, right?
Well, yes. And then you're both feeling good, and I learned that just sitting over in the corner and behaving like, a 2-year-old really wasn't of much help to myself or anyone else. But I think that period of isolation that was there made me look at my own behaviors and know that, did I really want to continue to do that, and I agree with you. You get your own power back. You're not giving the power away to somebody else for those things.
Yeah. And I love what you just said about that quiet time. Like, I feel like when we're deep in that loneliness, isolation, it can become clarification.
Yes.
Like where the fog lifts, we are just with ourselves. Usually people do not choose to be in that situation.
No, I wouldn't have chosen that, but God knew I needed it.
Yes, and I 100% would have not chosen what I've gone through with multiple moves. But I have found every time when I am alone and feeling deeply lonely, that it's like the fog of life lifts, the busyness, the got to do all the things, kind of it lifts, and in that space is a lot of clarity.
I totally agree. So what does your husband do? I'm interested. Several moves. Is he military or something like that?
No, so he is a project engineer. So earlier in our marriage, for the first 4 or 5 years, we just moved with his job. So wherever the project was being built, we moved to that state and lived there for a while. And then when the project was done, we moved to a different spot to live. And so that was the bulk of our moves. And then about a year ago, we started doing it again. So now we're in a new state. We've been here for a year. We'll be here for 5 more months and then we'll move again.
Right. So that, how are you coping with that challenge again?
So let's see, 9 years ago, I coped very differently than I do now, or even like a decade ago, because I did not have the skills. So earlier on, I let the loneliness and the lack of friends push me down and tell me something about who I was. I let my expectations define me, and my lack of meeting them define me. But now, as with each move, I learn something new, and I've realized that it's skills. Everything is a skill. Friendship is a skill. Walking through homesickness isn't something you have to be stuck in. It's a skill to learn how do I still love back home and love the people here, right?
Yeah.
So my journey has looked very different through the different moves, but I can tell you that every move is a step forward.
And I'm thinking that also it becomes a next learning step. If you can look at it like that, it becomes a place where, okay, now I add to my friends. I'm not losing friends, I'm adding, to my friends. And of course, the last couple of years, there hasn't been a lot of gathering anyway. So you can talk to anyone. I've reconnected with my friends in Australia way more in this time than I have for a long time. So
and a really unique thing about it is no matter where my family has moved, the culture has been slightly different. So the way that I make friends here is different than the way I made friends in Texas or in Ohio.
Where are you right now?
Right now we're in Wisconsin.
Oh, okay. That's very different to Texas.
Yes. Yep. A different culture. There's, different sayings, but also just like, I feel like each town has a slightly different culture, and it's learning to adjust and thrive when life looks different.
Yeah. I agree with you.
Yes. Awesome. So were there any times in your moving journey that you had to put up boundaries?
Yes. And for different reasons, in different places. Culture-wise, I mean, Australians are pretty different from, I live in Atlanta. So I sort of had to put up boundaries for myself sometimes, and then I had to put up boundaries for someone else, because I found that, which caused a whole heap of stuff again. But I realized that, my bouncy, casual self is not necessarily accepted. Some of my there's a lot of things that we say as Aussies that are considered rude here, and a lot of things you say are considered rude there. So, I had to sit down and go, I can't say these things because I'm going to offend someone. And then I had to go, I can't be offended if they say something in a different manner. I also had to put up some boundaries with people that, what would you say, tended to, and I found this in the beginning there, we'd run into some other people that came from Australia, and suddenly it was like you were their best friend, and suddenly you were minding their kids, and maybe that wasn't suitable. So I had to sort of watch exactly where I wanted to go and make sure that, one, I was not offending anyone and not taking offense, and also learning to say, no, just because we come from the same country, I don't know you. And no, I mean, and that came after I literally, some people came around for afternoon tea. We ran into their brother and came around for afternoon tea, and suddenly I had two teenagers for 3 weeks while they went away, and I didn't know these people. I could have been an axe murderer for all they knew, but it made me go, I just can't say yes because I'm that person. And that was the beginning of me really putting boundaries about what I was going to do that I really wanted to do, and understanding that it's absolutely yes, or it's absolutely no. And if it's not absolutely yes, then think about it, because I've ended up, especially in church service and other things, where I've ended up saying yes to too many things that I shouldn't have. And I'm not even sure I would have been asked, excepting they liked my accent.
They liked your accent.
And I think there were also boundaries with the kids as well. I had to set different boundaries with them because life here was a lot more, how could I say it? Like in Australia, at 18, you would never think of going to college. You would go to university from home.
Okay.
So I had to go, where's my boundaries on that? How do I feel about my, 18-year-old leaving home? And then I had to set boundaries on, life was a lot different here in the social life with the kids. So I had to really go, okay, well, this is going to be okay, but this is a boundary here. So, and I think that was a lot of just the culture change in countries. And still it's like that in Australia. You don't really go away to university. You go to the closest university and live at home.
Okay, yeah, that's very interesting. I have a friend who moved to the US from South Africa.
Right.
And she was saying that in South Africa, they have this set of beliefs, like their cultural beliefs. And here we have our set of beliefs. And she finds herself not really merging into either of them anymore, but blending and finding out where she really stands.
Yeah. And you know what? I would agree with that. I can remember, one of the first churches we were in. I mean, Aussies like to have a glass of wine or a beer, right? And you live in the South here, that's almost like taboo. There's been times where I've understood that people are coming to my home and they would be horribly offended if I had got out a bottle of wine for dinner. They would get very offended. So I've always tried to observe, the cultural differences. And when you're a Christian, and you've got to be careful of that too, stumbling other people. I never wanted to stumble anyone. Not like I'm drinking the whole bottle of wine at dinner. I mean, Australians are known for, hey, let's have a beer and a barbie. It's a much more casual atmosphere. And of course, we've surrounded ourselves now with people that are more casual, not that I don't like to get dressed up, but at first being casual was a bit of a leap from jeans at church to having to dress up and put a hat and high heels.
Yes. Yeah. It is a very interesting experience. I remember going to the first gathering in Texas, and I was from like way up north, Minnesota, and that culture change, like from stepping in, I knew I didn't fit.
Yeah.
Which was interesting, just looking around by the outfits and the big Texas hair and the way they talked and walked, and I was like, I don't fit here. I am so different. Yeah. Um,
I agree with that. And actually, it brought out the introvert in me in those situations.
mhm,
And I found myself, I go to choir practice and sit on the back seat and not talk to anyone.
mhm. Yeah, that uh, happened for me too. And something else that I stepped into as I started to try to be like them. I'm like, well, maybe if I'm like more Texan, I'll have more friends. Or like, um, I don't know, maybe if I just like try to fit into their culture and it it got me nowhere because I wasn't
Yeah.
who God made me to be. And um, I found like the moment that I stopped trying to pretend to fit in and just be me is when I started to get established within the community and find people to connect with.
I totally agree with that. And I think that you tend to do that, I started to wear skirts and things to church. But back in those days, I've always been a little, what would you say? I still do wear odd earrings. I just do. But back in those days, I was very evangelistic, really out there. So, I had black long fingernails, and on one hand, on this hand, it had Jesus, and this hand had saves. And you got no idea how many people would come up to me and think that I was really off. And so I put away a lot of that for a long time and stopped really being the mixture of me that I am. I really stopped for a long time. And then it's only been in the last couple of years I've went, I'm a strong enough person now that I've been through so much. I don't have to hide who I am. And
Mhm, mhm.
and that way you're attracting the genuine person who wants to be your friend.
Yes, yeah. And isn't it freeing stepping into yourself fully?
Oh, totally.
Yeah, there's
Totally 100%. Right these days I don't hesitate to um, just be myself.
mhm. Yeah, yeah, that's awesome. So if you could do your move again, would you do it differently with the knowledge that you've gained so far?
if if we moved again, which I don't see that, not countries anyway, we may move somewhere, but um, I would probably go armed with the knowledge that I wasn't going to know anyone, and that I did not need to be somebody else. I did not need to do anything but just be myself, and to really let the introvert go and sit in the corner for a while. And instead of waiting for people to come and introduce themselves to me, I would be way more open now to going and saying, hey, I'm Kate, I'm new here.
Mm. Yes.
You, what do you do? And I think that is better, instead of that me back then trying to just be whoever it was in the moment. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah. Yes, exactly. Yeah, and like you gave so many good tips that I feel like the last one of going up and introducing yourself is so incredibly value, especially to the introverts who,
Yep.
when they're in an uncomfortable situation, may draw back. Um, that that skill will get you so far in your friendships and your
Mhm.
new community because people who have not moved don't understand what a new person to the area needs.
Yes.
Yeah. And it's connection, but they don't know that.
No, they don't. They don't realize that, hey, you didn't bring your friends in the suitcases with you.
Right.
They didn't come with you. And you do. And even when, to me these days, I'm still meeting new friends every day. It doesn't mean that I still don't have my other friends, but just meeting new people. And sharing your journey and asking them what their journey is. I think that's the important thing, is listening as well.
Yes. Yeah. 100%. So, what encouragement do you have for the listeners who are going through a similar experience?
Well, the first thing that comes to mind is what I say to my clients. Feelings are a wave, and they don't last forever unless you decide that you're going to turn it into self-pity for yourself, instead of understanding and having compassion for yourself in this time of a time where you can reflect, a time where you can look around, find a new church, that was one of the other things. I joined the tennis team. I didn't even play tennis. But I learned, look in your community, find out what you can do. If you're living in a subdivision, go to the next social, go to the community pool while it's summer, and introduce yourself, see what neighbors are around you. Introduce yourself to your neighbours. The lady next door to me, when we first moved in, bought me a big bunch of cookies on a plate, which I thought was lovely. Her and I were never really, what would you say? I think I was just way too out there for her. She was a very quiet person. But, it taught me something, that now, instead of waiting for somebody to bring that to me, I would take that to my neighbour.
Yes, yeah.
I would make the cookies, I would make the cupcakes or something, and take them over and say, hey, I'm Kate, I just moved in next door or over the road or something, and I just wanted to introduce myself.
Yeah.
And it may be something else that you have that you want to give. You might not cook cookies or cupcakes or anything, but I strongly suggest that I wouldn't sit there waiting anymore. I would actually step out, and even if it was that was out of my comfort zone, you're going to grow through that. It's growth. And I think we're always growing. My husband and I have a saying, always a beginner.
Yes, that's awesome. So where can the listeners connect with you?
Okay, I have a website, which is katepenwornthompson.info, just the usual www. Everything is on my website. I am multiple certified coach. So I am a double certified life coach, master life coach. I am an AFT practitioner. I am a money coach. I am just certified through Life University with Dr. Axe as an essential oils coach, because I just love essential oils, and I coach with essential oils. So on there, you'll find a number of courses. I have written several courses. One, about the essential secrets of success. There's a lot of things there that if you could go and you'll find my journey on there, and how I've fallen down a lot in my life. I've changed feet a lot in my life, and I've learned to see it as exciting as the next thing. My ministry is with adoption. For a long time, I thought that was where I was meant to be, but no, I really like my mission is that I really like to help women get out of being stuck and overwhelmed by their present circumstances with their family, and help them to move on. And because I've had to do that, I'm sure you've had to do that too. So that's where I am. That's the best place. I do have Kate Penworn Thompson. I'm on Facebook. I have 2 groups there. If you're a coach, I have an essential oils coaching group there that is called, I think, it's the Oily Coaching Community. But my name is there. I've got a very unusual name. And the other one is I've just started a group that's called Sane Healthy Mamas. Because well, I think sometimes we can think as mums that we're not really sane, sometimes, especially if you're moving. And also, I believe that we don't look after ourselves sometimes. We need to.
Yeah, so that's a community for moms who are feeling overwhelmed.
Exactly. If you're feeling overwhelmed and you're thinking, you're looking at the TV or you're looking at that show and you see that perfect, almost, I Love Lucy mum in the apron and the high heels doing the vacuuming and the house is always perfect. Well, it's not. When you have kids and when you have multiple kids, and I've had times where I've had 10 kids at home. So that's a lot. And they have a big age group and lots of multiples. And sometimes you can feel really, really overwhelmed. And as they grow up to be teenagers, it's the same. Sometimes you think you're losing your mind when they become teenagers. So yeah, that's a new group that I've only really recently started, because I think that I'd love to help mums and women.
Yes, awesome. So for the listeners, all of Kate's links will be in the show notes. So just scroll down below and you'll be able to go there, check her out, check out her community. Kate, thank you so much for joining me on the podcast today.
Oh, thank you. It's been a pleasure. It's been a lot of fun.
Yes, it's been great.